This leads us on to one of the topics that I really wanted to discuss with you, the idea of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. It's kind of very, topical, maybe, for great reasons, but still very the last few years especially seems to be more and more prevalent in all areas of things. Is that same idea of, you are not a certain person, like that action was just that silly action. Um, but one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how does this actually manifest kind of in day to day, this idea of let's have a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset? How does that actually change how you approach any aspect of the day?
Personally or professionally?
Either.
Okay. So I think having a growth mindset is really tied to what I believe is the number one quality of champions. And I think that the number one quality of champions is optimism. Optimism being defined, I think, in two ways for me. And I get this definition from a book called How Champions Think by Dr. Bob Rotella, very famous sports psychologist. Number one, you are capable of doing X. Very simple. Number two, something good is about to happen. Those are kind of the two ways that I see optimism. Um, and when you encounter a challenge and you are an optimistic person or a person with a growth mindset, rather than looking for the reasons why you should give up, or the reasons why this isn't possible, or the reasons why this is unfair, or the reasons why whatever, right? You look at it from the perspective of, okay, here are the things that I can do to solve it. Here is the opportunity that this presents me. Here is what is under my control. Here are the things that I'm able to do to become a better person to the point that I can get through this adversity. And I think that's the key for me, right? That's for me the biggest thing about having a growth mindset. I mean, obviously I think that's mixing the two slightly, optimism and growth mindset, right? Because technically growth mindset is all about believing that people are able to change over time, right? Um, and I think that applies in many different ways within a coaching or team context, because you can have a great growth mindset with regards to yourself. You know, you can believe that you are capable of doing anything, but that's not necessarily, and that's optimism, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a growth mindset. It might just mean that you believe that you are really smart, right? And not that you can fundamentally change the person that you are in order to overcome something. And if you don't have that growth mindset, when you run into something that you can't do, the conclusion will be, I can't do this thing because I am not fast enough, not smart enough, not strong enough, because I'm bad at this, rather than I can't do this because I haven't worked at it enough yet. I can't do this because I haven't developed the skills yet. So I think they're very closely linked, but technically I think that's more closer to the definition of growth mindset. And it also applies to your teammates, right? When you're in a group sport context, when you're in a team sport context, the way that it applies to your teammates, and this is something we see so often in League of Legends teams, is we suck at this type of composition. We are bad at this champion. We cannot do this. We shouldn't play this champion. We shouldn't waste our time practicing this champion because we are bad at whatever. And that's where that's a big failing in terms of having a growth mindset, right? Or it's a big example of the issue of having a fixed mindset. And for me, that's a big cause of why many teams just don't improve over the course of the year. I think there are many factors there, right? But when since my time in Vitality, I find myself having this conversation with people quite often, people who are not necessarily used to the way that I've done things in the past, which is, why are we playing this champion when we're bad at it? And I'm like, we're playing this champion because we are bad at it. And yeah, we might lose a regular season game in winter, but in summer, when this champion, which has been ubiquitous throughout the competitive League of Legends meta for the last 8 years, when this champion is meta in summer, you're going to be grateful that you spent time on it in winter, because you are able to improve on that in the long term, right? There's nothing fundamentally stopping you, right? I'll use an example. I don't think that Vito will mind this. He's not been a player that's historically been known for his Azir, right? Azir is a really important champion. It's the same as if you're a top laner and you can't play Renekton. Renekton is a really important champion and has been historically for many, many, many years. And so putting in time on those champions now and understanding, okay, we might not be good at whatever it is right now, but we believe that we are able to learn these champions, and there's no reason why we aren't. There's nothing inherently stopping VTO from playing Azir. It's just that he hasn't built up the skill set or the confidence or the concept understanding or whatever it has been in the past that's been an issue for him. There's no reason why inherently about him. There might be things that he doesn't understand yet as a player, and that's not really an issue because those things can be taught easily, right? If you're driven and you work hard and you learn well, there's no reason why you can't learn those things to an S++ level, right? And all of the players that we have in Vitality, their hands are crazy good. They have such good hands, and we say this to them a lot. Like, guys, your hands are so good. Your hands are so good. Believe in yourselves. It doesn't matter if you can't do it yet. There's nothing holding you back. The only thing that's holding you back is whether or not you believe you can or can't. And your patience and your ability to be process oriented until such a time as you can do it. That's the only thing that's stopping you. There's nothing about you that is stopping you. And I say the same thing to them about Korean players, you know. So many players are like, oh, I couldn't do that, or my teammates will never be able to do that, or we will never be able to do that. We can't play that champion because we're not as good as LCK teams. I'm like, what? You think just because they're born in Korea, they have an advantage over you? Like, you think that makes them better at League of Legends or what? That's not the way it works, guys. Like, you need to believe. You need to believe that you can. Otherwise, you won't.
Yeah, I think it's so common, and it seems to happen with champions, for example. It seems to kind of go back and forward 100 times a split. It's like, this champion is useless, or like, we cannot play this, and then we cannot not play it, and then all that kind of thing. So just a few times I think that if I don't do this, we're just going to be agreeing the whole time, which is okay, but I want to explore these topics a bit. So to play devil's advocate a bit, how do you see this in terms of playing up to your strengths as a player? So you say, I mean, I don't know VTO, so I'm going to use it as an example because I know nothing about him. If the things that make him not just very good, but one of the best in the world, are things that are not useful on Azir, like, how does that factor in? How do you know when it's the right time to say, okay, we should play up to your strengths, which is this certain champions or these certain play styles? Or how do you know when that's just being fixed mindset? Like, how do you draw that line?
Sure. So I think there are times to prioritize winning in the short term, like when you're at Worlds. Like, Worlds is not, you don't go there at the most stressful time of the year and go, we're going to learn a new champion, we're going to play a new style. Like, that's not what you do when you go to Worlds, right? And the same for playoffs and things like that. So you need to take on those projects during times of low stress, when people are more capable of learning, when they're less burnt out, when they're less emotional, when they have less on their plate, when they're less tired, frankly. So there's a balance there between when you choose results and when you choose learning. There's also, and I think the reason why that balance is important is because if you get it wrong and you do the other side, let's say you only say, you go, okay, well, we're not going to play any of these champions because we're not good on them. So what's the point? And then you get to playoffs and your champions get nerfed, or let's say you're playing really, really high resource top lane style. Let's say you're playing carry top lane style. And suddenly the meta is Zeri, Lulu, control mage is mid, and you can't play the game without tanks top, because to play League of Legends, you kind of need engage most of the time. Most comps need engage to play League of Legends. and top is the only role where we can get engage. Well, I guess you missed worlds if you don't learn it, right? So you need to be able to learn enough to get by in a situation where your current specialism and your strengths are limited by the meta or by enemy teams just banning you out, right? That also happens. Okay, well, we know that such and such only plays control mages, so we're going to ban 2 control mages and pick the third on first pick. Do something about it. And that's a situation that you will really, really struggle with unless you work to diversify a bit in terms of your skill set.